turning this baby off.
Never turn it off. There's so much magic coming through.
Yeah. Magic coming through my baby.
Yeah, so
that could be a lyric you guys use.
It could be a lyric.
Yeah.
We're just shooting the shit about music. Starting off.
So if you're wondering what we're doing, we're just shooting the shit about music.
We're starting off strong, talking about music.
Shooting the shit, by the way.
Shooting the shit. Yeah.
Like, did people ever? I mean, this is going to be a really gross start to a show, but
it is vomiting rainbows.
Go to the bathroom. Did they like poop? Put their poop on a fence and then try to like you shoot cans.
Yeah.
Is that shooting the? I mean, it's like, does it come from shit talking?
No, I think I assume it comes from shit talking.
You would think.
Yeah.
Where does shit talking come from?
Shit talking means that you're talking a bunch of bullshit.
Out of your ass.
You're talking out of your ass.
Right. So then talking out of your ass came from
farting.
Like so your words are as valuable as wind leaving your rectum.
And probably just as bad.
Got it. I unfortunately I don't feel like we've solved this, but I think we're really
close,
and I'm not sure it's worth. I think it's better having to be like a Charlie Kaufman or a Paul Thomas Anderson thing, where there's stuff for interpretation,
right?
Versus like a Steven Spielberg of we're gonna like kind of define what emotions you're gonna have in this situation.
Okay, but what do we just do? Is that etymology?
That's what the little green the little things you get before you eat sushi. There's a study of those?
Yeah, there's a study of those. That's perfect.
That's interesting.
It's either, I think entomology is the study of insects.
Sure.
And etymology is the study of words.
Yeah, you'll never get an answer from me of any of the things that just get out of my mouth, but I appreciate you saying them.
And etymology is what you get right.
I can talk to you about edamame.
All day long.
Yep.
This is Vomiting Rainbows, episode number 46. It's a darker news cast where I tell my co-host Joe, the man, the myth, the legend, the one-legged legend.
Yeah, still got one leg. Well, I'd say it's 1.5 at this point.
It's 1.5.
Yeah, because I can kind of walk on the other leg.
Yeah, he fucked up one leg.
Yep.
Yep. He's hoping not to fuck it up again.
Yep.
Ended his basketball career.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I mean, I think that the Warriors will do okay, but I think come playoffs they could have used
where you were about to get
really average small school, high school level shooter who could probably not even make it to the rim from 3-point range.
Yeah, but I thought the Cavs were like going to recruit you.
Well, that's true. I could probably play off the bench in the Cavs.
And that's about as far as I'm going to be able to go with any sports knowledge whatsoever.
Nice, good job, Doug.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you some stories that you know nothing about, and you're going to spit them back in a colorful rainbow.
Awesome.
Do
you ever feel like a liar if you actually say a story that I do know something about? Or am I supposed to claim that?
Yeah.
Is that like when you play those escape from... You know those games that are like really popular now? It's escape from whatever.
Yeah.
The escape room.
Right.
And once in a while, people, if you've done it before,
yes,
you just like rule.
You rule.
Yeah, and for sure, people are trying to like go on a date, say they've never done it, and just act like they're the smartest person in the world, get a second date, and end up being a moron. I've done that.
I have not tried that, but it's a great idea.
Yeah, you can take that, man.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Why don't we jump right in and talk about LDS?
Fair. They just played 2 nights at the Program Civic. LDS sound system? Sorry, I was in this whole show I could make stupid jokes about words and letters.
Okay. Yeah. You can definitely. We're really talking about the place down the street, the Latter-day Saints.
Oh, got it. Yep.
Mormons. What do you know about Mormons?
Great people.
Great people.
At times.
At times.
Not all the time.
There's a bug.
You gotta make this shit so personal sometimes. See, now if I talk about my personal experience with Mormons, it's gonna be personal.
No, I think you have to talk about your personal
experience. But then what if that person... So I've had some experience with Mormons, and I think, wonderful people. They had a swear jar, which I thought was kind of cool.
I want to hear more about the Mormons. Well, what was your experience with...
This person had a swear jar, so anytime someone would swear, you have to put money in this jar. And I think she made good money from that. Because a lot of people swore. This is in radio. A lot of people... because the thing is with like broadcast radio, you're so attuned to not swear on the radio.
Oh,
then when you're off the radio, you're like spitfiring shitfest.
I was just last night talking to Eric from the Limousines.
Oh, sure.
And he was telling me about his experience in radio, and one of the guys that he worked with had this term, I can't remember what it was, but it was basically like trying to get people out as quickly as possible when they were fired, because they wanted to get them out because a lot of them could go on the air and be like, they could walk in and go, fuck, shit, fuck, and then that's like $1 million in fines.
And it's crazy because there have been instances that I've witnessed personally with, and definitely not naming names here, but with, let's say, some of like one of the most significant talks. No, not Eric. One of the most significant probably talk radio stations in the country. When you lose names that have been there 40 years, even those people, they're still. And I guess it depends on the company, but like I've seen someone who's been on the air for 40 years, like a legend, have to deal with that same instance.
Yeah.
Where they bring him into a room and they're like, okay, you're no longer working here. Here's your severance. Here's this. You're never, and it's tough because 40 years. Think about the personal relationships. Now it's a one-way relationship in radio usually, where the listener is not always interacting. Though there is email and calls, but for the most part, you have these like crazy connections with people, and you're not even saying bye.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing.
It's hard too. Like Mike, who also does our podcast.
Yeah.
He had a huge Facebook presence under his radio moniker.
Right.
And Facebook did that thing. Remember when they were like, "Oh, you have to use your real name," and so they just so they killed his account.
Just deleted the whole thing.
And he just lost all access to that.
Yeah, that's
right before he left a previous radio station.
Yeah.
So all those people, he just disappeared to them.
Yeah, that's a big deal. What do they say? Don't build your castle on someone else's sand.
Yeah.
Don't float your boat in someone else's river. Don't trim your tree in someone else's yard. What's the right saying? There's a saying there where it's like, because that happened to a lot of people in Facebook or someone where you build a company on that, which a lot of people do.
Don't dip your pen in the company ink.
No, don't. That's the fish off the company pier thing. Well, I don't know.
Okay.
I feel like this show is becoming what we don't know with Doug and Joe.
What we don't know.
What we don't know
with Doug and Joe. Yeah, that'd be great.
So LDS.
All right. So they have these things called I think it's called tits.
Tits?
They have tits. And you only get to go to heaven if you give them 10% of your income.
Wait, this is real?
This is real.
Holy
so you're supposed to give 10% of your income.
Yeah.
Every time, like when you go to church.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're going to hell.
Right.
But is it you're going to hell or are you in limbo?
Well, you don't get to go
So they don't say you're going to hell. They say you're not getting into heaven.
Well, they have several different types of heaven. So if you're
but
good,
90% of your income heaven.
Yeah. So if you go, they see it as like planets, and there are different gods on different planets.
Okay.
And like, if you're pretty good, you go to one planet. If you're really good, you go to another planet.
Okay.
And then if you're like a church deity, like a person in the church, like a deacon or whatever they call them, then you get to go to a super cool place.
Nice.
But if you're women,
like Capri.
But if you're women, you just birth spirit babies in heaven.
But you don't know what.
No, I don't think. I think you go to spirit baby girl. Yeah, you go to girl baby heaven.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of rough.
Yeah.
So is that entire dark news topic? Because that's pretty dark.
Yeah. They also believe that Native Americans are descendants of ancient Israelis. And that dark skin is a sign of God's curse, and white skin is a sign of God's blessing.
I didn't know any of this, man.
There's even more.
Now, are we so we define, and this is again coming from a very ignorant perspective because I'm not super familiar with Latter-day Saints. Is this an Old Testament, New Testament type? Like, are you pulling from current universally accepted? I'm sure there's a spectrum in anything, granted, but is the information now that you're pulling from like a more traditional sect of, I don't know if that's the right word to use, Latter-day Saints, or is this like primarily generally accepted in the most current writings of the religion?
This is general Mormon principles.
Wow.
And most of them, they don't want anyone outside the church knowing.
So are we going to get killed? Is this like...
I mean, possibly. They using a magic egg stone.
How did you find all this?
It's all over the internet.
Okay.
Yeah,
so they're not good at keeping a secret.
No, not at all. using a magic egg stone and magic glasses given to him by the prophet / angel Moroni, literally Moroni, and looking into a hat, Smith created Mormonism, or the Mormon faith. Brigham Young. Well, no, Brigham Young is later.
Oh, got it.
Or I think he was like, I don't know. I'm gonna get this wrong.
Sure, like a descendant of Smith.
No, I think he was like the guy who followed up Smith. Like Smith was like eventually, like not accepted.
Yeah.
The creator of the religion.
Right.
So you would think that would make that all bunk.
Yeah.
But they just kept going.
Wow.
Probably because they're getting 10% of everybody's income.
Yeah.
So you don't want to cut that off. He looks into a hat, read gold plates, and created the religion. But he didn't really have to see the gold plates because he could look into the hat with his magic glasses and look at the egg.
I mean, again, though, like Ten Commandments and all that stuff, it's very aligned, except that has been so accepted as like an older version of thought, maybe.
It's
in certain parts of the religion.
I would say it's equally, climbing up a hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not very religious.
Yeah.
So, and then 9 people say they saw these gold plates, but only with their spiritual eyes.
Sweet.
Of which 8 of them.
Like Google Glass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Of which 8 of them were eventually excommunicated and were related to Smith. So Ben just edited some of the podcasts.
Yeah, so. Apparently Ben is Mormon.
Yeah,
he's like a nuts and dog.
Hold on, what do you got to say, Ben? Okay, now he's gonna be quiet. After, wow, he went way down there. So yeah, well, what else do you know about Mormonism?
Stall. I think we're at, I think their choir is damn good. The Tabernacle Choir.
Oh yeah.
Real quality stuff. I think as creepy as I get in the vibe of their buildings sometimes.
Right.
Their temples, I do think they're pretty cool. And I've heard
you've gone in one.
No, but like just driving by them, because you'll see them in, there'll be these massive temples in a major city, and they're so, and I've been like through Utah City, and like they're so powerful because there's this like sharp white in the middle of this like big city, and then they'll have like the little gold figurine.
Yeah.
And I've heard, I don't know if this is true at all, I've heard a random rumor, someone told me that there's a belief that there will be a moment where there's like a battle, and those little like gold figurines like will come to life, and they like are protectors of the temple. That might not be true.
Right.
But yeah, that's something I heard. So I always kind of thought those little figurines are kind of trippy.
I'm gonna pause for just a second.
Sure.
And figure out what's going on with the low storage thing. Yes, delete a previous version of Windows. That sounds like smart. And then let's also empty the recycle bin. Okay.
Edit point there, huh?
Okay.
I could have just beatboxed for that 30 seconds.
You could have just beatboxed.
Badly, but
that would have been pretty awesome. So Mormons also have this thing that they believe that the only people who experience true love and get to go to heaven together are those people who are married in the church. Mm-hmm. If you're married outside the church, you experience a lesser relationship.
Right.
So we're probably never going to experience.
Noted.
So you might want to get married in the LDS church.
Got it.
Also, while they have denied this completely, that they do not believe in the plurality of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Smith and anybody who is a prophet or a head of the church, those people, whatever they say becomes part of the religion.
Wow.
So they can say like,
Dude, what if like Trump became Latter-day Saints?
Oh, it would be insane.
That would just be incredible amounts of interesting information that is horrible for the world added to their religion.
Yeah, well, one of the heads of the church said that children should not play on Sunday. So children aren't allowed to play on Sunday.
That's where it sits currently.
Yeah, that's where it sits.
When
currently.
Did that happen?
I don't know. Yeah. I think in the 70s, but okay. It basically.
So the children haven't played 1 day a week for 40 years.
Yeah.
47 years.
And as a kid, Sunday's like a pretty big
play day. That's a good play day.
That's like right before the week's starting. You're ready to blow out a lot of energy.
I mean, maybe that's how Sunday morning cartoons became so popular, because the kids couldn't play; they had to just watch cartoons.
Possibly.
And maybe this person had like an inside deal with Sesame Street, or Roger Rabbit, or
perhaps.
No, I can't. Rocky the Raccoon. No.
And
Woody the Woodpecker. That's what I was trying to think of.
I don't even know where you were going.
It's a great show.
It is a great show. He was like,
yeah. It was like the woodpecker version of Porky the Pig.
Okay.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
They all had their catchphrase.
Stuttering Animals.
Yes. That's adorable.
Also a good band name.
Stuttering Animals. Dude.
Yeah.
Don't take it.
That's a serious look you're giving me there.
Yeah, I like it. The other thing that almost everyone knows about LDS is, of course, the fact that they do not, they abstain from drinking alcohol, caffeine, tobacco.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they're not allowed to have hot beverages.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which I'm totally cool with, because I don't like hot beverages.
Really?
No, I don't like
coffee.
No. Ugh.
Tea, hot tea. You're all about your iced tea.
Lukewarm.
Interesting. Max. So wait, when's the last time you had a warm beverage?
Oh, like I mean, I'll have a lukewarm beverage, but I don't like a hot beverage.
I mean, what's a lukewarm beverage then?
At Starbucks, it's child temperature.
Really?
Really.
So you say I would like a latte child's temp?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God.
What?
No, nothing. Nothing.
I'm comfortable in my own sexuality.
I'm proud of you, man.
Thanks.
Interesting. That's just like, where do you think that came from?
Well, I just don't like hot things.
Yeah, but I mean, where did that come from?
It came from burning my tongue.
Cold-blooded?
No.
So it came. Did you have like a really bad?
No, just every time.
Did you eat a piece of pizza that was like really hot as a child? And it was just like ah.
No, just think about hot pockets. I mean, you've done that.
Yeah, everyone's burned it up. I feel like you more so burn your tongue on, like I say, pizza, hot pockets. Your nice chicken bake from Costco, if you will. But for the most part, liquid, because you can feel
pizza rolls.
Absolutely anything that's like this weird thick pastry with like gooey cheese in the middle, you're pretty like high % chance of risk.
Right.
Liquid, on the other hand, most of the time you can hold you can see the steam. You have a lot of cues you can work with.
Right.
So I feel like there's been time for you to appreciate, and I don't want to change who you are. I don't want to sit here and criticize. I'm not. But I think it's intriguing that a man of such refined taste as yourself has chosen to not revisit the warm liquid market.
I like that you keep scooting back away from it. you're gonna be at the front door of my house.
I'm an person. I can't really defend myself from all these things, physically or emotionally.
So this great prophet who created.
So you're not going to answer this question, though.
No, I'm not. I'm going to keep going.
Right, fair.
So the Book of Abraham, also known as the Book of Breathing, was translated by Joseph Smith, and it was actually brought over from mummies and on papyrus and hieroglyphics.
Damn.
He, being the great scholar that he is, he translated that, and that became that Book of Breathing. Years later, the LDS in the 20th century allowed the top researchers to translate this.
Mm-hmm. The papyrus.
The papyrus. And what they said about his translation was one from Oxford University said this guy is a complete fraud. London University said this is an absurd translation. The University of Chicago said it's absolutely translated by an ignorant person. A person from Brown University said a work whose explanations are completely wrong. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's translator said it was a work of pure fabrication. And the Western Theological Seminary said it's a work of pure imagination. while the LDS says that Joseph Smith was highly ethical, truth-seeking, law-abiding person. His neighbors who knew him before anything in the church said he was a con artist who made up stories about seeing stones that could find treasure, and often ripped off his neighbors, relatives, other farmers in town, telling them that there was treasure on their property.
Wow.
He was one local, I guess, sheriff said that he was watched every time he entered a home or store because he and his family would steal anything they could get their hands on. And one of his other neighbors said they were the lowest of the low.
So now, was this before, because you said the church basically, or not the church, but the LDS basically pushed him out and then brought it back years later? Is this information part of that? That's what caused him, they realized this, like he had maybe not the best character
one
there?
And as you said, like Mormons in general are very devout people. And one of the former leaders of the Mormon church said, we need to get to the bottom of this, because if in the 1850s, they said, if he has lied or misrepresented what he has done, then he has pulled a con over on millions of people, and it could affect millions of lives.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be doing this. So
when was that said?
That was like in the 1850s.
Okay.
So
they got over that.
Yeah, they got over that.
Yeah.
They're cool with it.
Okay.
So let's step.
Yeah, this is a real big preface.
It is, but I think you'll appreciate it because
I think the backstory maybe is necessary here.
All right, so let's talk about Elizabeth Smart. So Elizabeth Smart last week released her autobiographical miniseries, and it's basically her abduction and a study on how not to create and do an investigation.
Okay.
So you know about Elizabeth Smart. I met somebody who, just kicking around this idea of this story, I met somebody who was an ex-Mormon who is now living outside of the church, and absolutely was stunned that Elizabeth Smart is still part of the faith.
Interesting. Because
when you're in the church, as we said before, you're considered less valuable than men. And when you've been tortured and oppressed as she was, why would you go back to a religion that's oppressive to you?
Yeah, but thinking about what she, the trauma and the level of what she went through, emotionally, I don't know. It's probably hard to make any decision, let alone the best decisions for yourself.
Yeah, so
you're brainwashed on some level.
Yeah, but so watching her story was really you've got to think, as John Walsh said from America's Most Wanted, what he said was, you have no one has the right to judge her or her decisions, because she was 14 when this occurred, and she felt like this person who had done this to her had far-reaching capability. He had snuck into her house, taken her from the bed right by her sister, and then taken her into the woods and held her captive, and said that he could get to her family at any time and kill them.
Right.
Which he had already proven. He had been in the house. He had walked out the front door, right by the parents' bedroom. So she was 14 when she was abducted in Salt Lake City by Brian Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. Her sister was the only witness, and she pretended to be asleep because she was so afraid of what was going on.
Right.
So, could you imagine kind of the guilt that her sister probably has?
Yeah, but what is her sister going to do in that, with grown people?
Oh, nothing.
But absolutely, you'd live with that your entire life.
Well, either that or, he would abduct her too.
Yep.
And that would be...
Or maybe worse.
Even worse. Or kill her and then take her sister. You have no idea. And at 14, you have no idea what to do. You run into your parents' room, if you hear something. So, but she stayed asleep until later in the morning, and then went and got her parents. And her parents thought she was having a bad dream, but they came up to investigate. They went down actually to the kitchen, and when they went to the kitchen, they saw a cut in the screen, and that's when they realized that this was bad. Something, and the only reason the window was open, and this is what I think her mom said a lot, which you can tell she feels guilty about, which for no reason whatsoever, she left the window open because she burned potatoes because Elizabeth had a huge concert that night, and they were running late. And so there's a lot of that. But then, of course, the police came in. The whole family, her whole community came in and was in the house that they had just been abducted from and completely contaminated the crime scene. It's stunning what happened there. Yeah. Like one of the police officers just said, "I've never seen a worse negligent case of." He said younger cops are on the night shift. They went to this call, thought it was nothing. And then when they went in and found out it was something...
So they thought it was a runaway, right?
Or something. Initially, They weren't sure, but it didn't seem like that big of a deal. And so they allowed the family just to continue around there. And at one point, Elizabeth Smart's father said, "Shouldn't you guys be, like, stopping people from going in here?" Like, he said he almost touched the counter where the screen was. And... he didn't, because he was like, "This. What if we need fingerprints? What if we need fingerprints?"
Yep.
And it was just crazy. So while they're walking up the hill, Mitchell tells Elizabeth that she's going to have company soon. Like, he's going to start kidnapping other people.
Oh God.
And he starts talking about neighborhoods and things of that nature, and she actually mentions, "Oh, my cousin lives in that neighborhood." And that's...
Is this now just coming out? I don't remember most of this.
It probably came out. So she wrote a book a while back.
It's all mostly from the book.
It's all mostly from the book.
Okay.
I'm not sure how active she was. Well, yeah, she was very active in this because she was talking throughout the whole thing. But it was just like real. I mean, you couldn't even imagine what she was going through. Then she was taken up into the hills. She was forced to put on a gown and take off all of her like undergarments, and then she was immediately raped. And it was like, the start of something that was horrible. She was up in the woods for several weeks, and mentioned her cousin. He said, "Okay, God spoke to me, and I'm going to have to go get your cousin now." And then now she's living with her own regret, and now thinking that she's put her cousin into danger. She was taken. He started actually taking her to town, where her father, like right by her father. They put a veil on her, and he started forcing her to drink wine, which is against her religion.
And she's also 14 still?
Yeah, still 14. This all happened, I think, in 9 months. So I don't think she turned 15 during that time frame. But he once took her into town, and she went to a party, like an underground Salt Lake City party that was non-LDS, and Mitchell got into an altercation with a bunch of punk kids at this party, and the punk kids actually were trying to get Elizabeth to remove her veil, and he was starting with them and saying, as they said, all this religious talk. And they wanted nothing to do with it. One of the guys pulled Elizabeth to the side and told her that she was that this guy seemed like a really bad dude, and he needed to get away from her. And that was it. He was talking on the documentary I should have done more. He felt really remorseful. He now has 2 daughters, and he was just destroyed. That there's a picture of him at the party with Elizabeth Smart, and it's like one of those ones that they released right after they got her, or they found out what had happened. Around this time, the police honed in on this guy Richard Reese, who was outed as a criminal who worked for the Smart family. He had stolen a bunch of jewelry from them. There was inconsistencies in his story, and he became like a suspect. But his girlfriend at the time said, he was at home with me. There's no way he did this. This is absolute nonsense.
Right.
And they just started grilling him like nonstop. On one trip to town, she and Mitchell were in a library, and while they were in the library, a detective came right up to Elizabeth Smart and said, "I want to talk to you, and I want you to pull your veil off."
Whoa.
And Mitchell said, "Absolutely not. The only people who are allowed to see her without her veil on are myself, her husband, and her father." And the detective kind of talked to him a little bit more, but let him go.
Yeah, that's insane.
I mean, and she...
But that again has got to be, I mean, not fully accredited, but partially accredited, just like the level of like rules and religious overtone that are in these places are at a point that you say, like, when you sense that there might be some level of ignorance when someone is responding to you with that level of confidence, then you don't want to stumble into that place of political incorrectness or religious incorrectness and get in trouble.
Especially in Salt Lake City.
Exactly, which is I'm sure what the sheriff was thinking.
Right, and he was at this time he was going by the name Emmanuel, and that's what he gave the police officer.
Yeah.
So then in October, so this is about, and Elizabeth Smart at that point from the library said, if she had grabbed the cop, it would have saved her 6 months of abuse.
Now, does she talk about, I mean, and again, there's no way you can even begin to imagine the decisions, but does she touch on her thought, like, was the thought process just, I can't do anything, or she felt like she maybe wasn't even beginning to imagine acting on things, or she wasn't thinking anything, or was she thinking, like, maybe I should reach out and grab the cop?
She wanted to scream.
Yeah.
And
but the fear was so much.
Well, no, what she thought is, what if they don't believe me and let him go, because he's been let go several times before.
Right.
Like when they first came in, they passed a police officer when she was first abducted, and the police didn't do anything.
Right.
He had been stopped before and questioned.
So she was thinking about it, she just didn't think it would work, or she wasn't sure it would work, and then she'd be screwed.
Right.
Yeah.
But this really rattled Mitchell, Brian Mitchell, and he Emmanuel. It really rattled him, and so then they made plans, and he started panhandling like crazy. That's how he was getting money. He said he was getting devotionals, but he was really just going down and panhandling. And they were literally living in tents in the mountains, in the woods. And it was, I can only imagine the conditions were terrible.
Yeah.
So they then took a bus to San Diego, where they camped out, and she said it was like that fire swamp in Princess Bride, the place that they stayed.
Yeah.
She said it was full of like crazy bugs and animals, and it was just terrible.
Wow.
So they were in San Diego, and that's when they released a sketch of the drifter that they wanted to talk to, and the drifter Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
And San Diego police refused to put up the picture because they were like, this is not pertinent to us. So he broke into a church and slept there overnight. And when he woke up, the police came, arrested him, and took him to jail. He went through the whole booking process. They didn't find anything from his fingerprints, or because he had never been arrested before.
Mm-hmm.
And so they let him go. And if they had had that picture, it would have said wanted in connection, and it just like him. And at that point, they already knew because when they were out, Emmanuel or Brian had done work for the Smart family before. That's how it like roof work one day, and the daughter put it all together and was like, I think it was this guy, and the police ignored that.
Holy smokes.
But they said they kind of put this together, and then they're like, okay, well, we'll at least say that we want to talk to him. And so they only put wanted in connection with questioning about Elizabeth Smart. And the San Diego cops just completely dropped the ball on that. So
what year is this?
This is still
same 9 months first.
This is now starting into 2003.
Okay.
So while he was down getting booked in, Elizabeth and the wife were up in the hills without food or water for 3 days.
Damn.
And she said she was so hungry and thirsty that they had like this bathroom pit that they threw stuff in, like garbage and poop and everything. And that bathroom pit, she remembered that she had a grapefruit and the skin might still be in there. And she started to look through.
Oh my God.
To see.
You're getting like delusional at that point.
Yeah.
Too, especially without water.
Yeah. So, I mean, horrifying situation. And then he comes back up on the 3rd day with a half-eaten bucket of chicken, and like eats it in front of them, and then like after like 30 minutes says, "Oh, do you guys want some food?" This guy's a fucking dick.
Yeah, on the highest of
yeah.
all levels.
So America's Most Wanted puts us, like, the cops say, don't release this information. It will, to the Smart family. Like, your thoughts about this guy. And Walsh is talking to the father, and he says, hey, we think it might be this guy, but the cops won't let us talk about it.
And why? Is that because they think they're still building enough of a case to convict the person?
Well, or they
feel like it would show their kind of like mistakes along the way?
Or it might cause him to kill Elizabeth and start running or something.
That's probably a fair concern.
But he has no TV. He's living in the woods. Well, they don't know this. But,
true.
But anyway, so Walsh just kind of goes renegade and puts out this sketch.
Probably with support from the father.
They don't say that, but anyway, so he does go ahead and do that, and then
on America's Most Wanted,
a woman sees the show. The next day, they're walking through town, and Elizabeth Smart no longer has a veil on because that was drawing too much attention. So now they put her in like a gray wig with sunglasses on.
Oh my God!
And this woman passes by and sees this guy who's wearing a garb, woman
with his same face, similar to that sketch.
Yeah, exactly. And she recognizes him.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's him.
Yeah.
There's a girl with him that has similar facial features. Yeah. And the woman, they didn't know about the woman at the time, but the wife, she was like, there's 2 people with a girl, and the guy looks just like them. So she's like, I want to call America's Most Wanted. And the husband says, no, let's not get involved.
Dude,
and
what?
No, but get this. She's like, screw you.
Good for her.
And so she calls America's Most Wanted anyway, and they send cops to investigate. And at that point, then she walks off to the side, and they pull her away, and she says, they ask her if she's Elizabeth Smart, and she says, no, this is my dad. Like,
so wait, when you say was that fast enough that the woman saw them on the street and like went to a payphone and they had cops like while they're still on that trip downtown, or they had to actually go up into the woods and like track them down?
No, they were still on the road.
Oh, got it.
So they were able to get there fast enough. They pulled him aside. He gave a fake name. They all gave fake names, and they're like, these are all. They called them in. They're like, these are all fake names. Finally, the cops were like on it.
Yeah.
And then they arrested. This officer's like, you clearly look to me like Elizabeth Smart. He holds the thing up, and she goes, I'm not. And her whole thing was, again, she's been now tortured for like 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
So she's just like, I don't want to tell you because like he's gotten away with this over and over again. He'll probably be released if and then she was in cuffs. They put them all in cuffs. And she's like, I only know of like TV shows. When people are in cuffs, they're going to jail. So she's like, I could be put in jail with him.
Yeah.
He could kill me in the cell.
Yeah.
Like, she has no idea what's going to happen. So finally, they do get her alone. She does admit she's Elizabeth Smart. They finally figure out who he is, find out that he's from Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
They put it all together, and then they're able to, like, rescue her. And so she started her own foundation. And a lot of things kind of, spiraled out of that. But
what happened to him and the wife?
So this is the craziest part.
Yeah.
He didn't stand trial for 8 years.
But he was in custody.
He was in custody in a mental health facility
because
he kept spouting. When the San Diego Police Department first started talking to him, this one of the police officers said, "I've worked with a lot of mentally ill patients, and this seems like somebody who's playing mentally ill to try and get out of this."
Right.
And so he was declared incompetent to stand trial, and then they just put you in a mental health facility until you're able to stand trial.
Oh my God.
So
obviously he would just play that off if he was playing it off at that point.
Yeah, and eventually they said, "We don't believe you. We don't believe that you're that person anymore. Like, that you're mentally ill." So he was declared fit to stand trial, and then he's now got life in prison without parole. That was in 2009.
And that was in California or in Utah?
That was in California.
And then what happened to the wife?
The wife got 15 years in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, she should have gotten a lot more.
Yeah,
she should not
they
ever
should
been.
never be out.
She should never be out. December of 2010. So she was kidnapped in 2002. Jeez. So in 2010, he was found guilty. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, that is insane.
And like, they have all these reports of like the sisters and like saying that he was just a bad seed from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, there's got to be, you think about when you start to tear away the layers of these stories, you think about, because you mentioned it earlier, just like the level of guilt from so many different perspectives, and having the sister in the bedroom and then the mom in the window, but then like think about all the people who knew this guy and could probably speak to this craziness, and it's just like every step of the way you have this level of regret in everyone who's been involved, and all the people in town who probably just, I mean, I guess they wouldn't know. I guess how would they know? But then you think about, I don't know, in a city like San Francisco and New York and in LA, that seems like it's way more reasonable to have someone walking around with like a younger person, being weird. But in any kind of smaller city or town, like, how do you if you're going to, it sounds like they had a bit of a routine. It wasn't like a super common being downtown, but they would go to the same places. I just don't know how that goes on for as long as it did. Even if it was only 9 months or whatnot, just to have it like go on that long and not have some question raised. But
it's just so hard to say.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's our first lovely story.
Oh man!
And then
that was
you know what?
We're 45 in.
We're 45 in. Wow. Okay, maybe we should split this into 2 parts.
I think we do 2 parts.
All right, hold on. We'll just do this. So this will be the end of part 1 of.
Yeah. See, this is how Game of Thrones works. This is how you keep. This is why our listenership is only in the top 10%, not the top 1% of all shows ever created.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
For part 2.
Yeah.
Which will be equally exciting.
It's gonna be crazy.
It's gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Really crazy.
Yeah. High level of that.
That's where we know it stops.
I'm gonna have to go soon, dude.
Okay.
But I could do one more, I guess.
Here, I'll
It's almost 6.
Okay.
The last current, let's for sure do it.
Yeah.
We got to do it now.
Yeah, it's current because I want to here. Let me export this to here. Your work. Okay, and create new folder.
Because it only will let you upload an hour, right?
No, it'll let me do more, but it's my own server. Okay, so we'll call this part 1. Yeah, that's crazy. That's a long time. I was afraid of that. I was almost going to say we should do the whole episode just on Smart because it's crazy.
That was insane. Wait, did all that just come out?
Yeah.
And I didn't know all that just came out.
There was this whole thing on her that was like, I watched it. I downloaded it last night. I went on this
rabbit hole. Like, yeah.
So.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and then I finished all the stuff up this morning, and it was crazy. I was just shocked. I had no idea it was like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but so when did all that info come out, though?
It came out in her book, and she's done some stuff about it.
But that's like a year old, or no, it's actually really recent.
No, it was her book was here in 2013.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so a while ago. So
it's gotta be a movie.
And she did.
Any minute, dude.
Yeah. All right. So here, now we'll talk about
part 2.
So now we're gonna go into part 2 of Vomiting Rainbows. This is episode number 46. I hope you're still with us, and this part is gonna be really exciting. So, guess what happened last night?
What happened last night? Wait, do I have to guess?
Do you want to guess?
No, I don't want to. No.
Okay. So, it finally happened. Charles Manson.
He died.
Yeah,
I knew this.
He shuffled off this mortal coil at 83 in Bakerfield's Kern Hospital at 8:15 p.m.
Yeah. Wasn't he with some like young wife?
Yeah, I think that
was years ago.
Yeah, that was years ago.
That was weird. I watched some stuff on that.
That was really weird.
Yep.
He had a sigmoid lesion and lower gastrointestinal bleeding, which is basically butt cancer and butt bleeding. So he's dead.
That's okay.
So let's talk a little bit about Manson.
These are two massive stories.
They are. Okay. But we'll go quickly through Manson.
So you're going to cover the whole biography of Charles Manson right now?
No, I'm not.
Of our show. Okay.
No, I'm just going to talk about like little known facts about Manson. He had 3 kids.
Didn't know that.
One committed suicide because he couldn't handle the fact that he was Charles Manson's child.
Interesting.
And another one changed his name and went off the grid and can't be found.
Wow.
The third finally came out and owned kind of his heritage and said, I was raised by my mother's grandparents and I'm a well-adjusted child and I have nothing to do with like any of the...
Kept his name though.
Yeah, he did, and he actually tried to visit Manson in the hospital and was refused.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't believe him.
Right. So Manson's adopted sister said that Manson was never happy, never up to anything good. He was obsessed with knives and guns, had intense anger problems as a child, and threatened her with a sickle when she was 9.
It was always out of his mind.
So he's batshit.
Yeah.
So his mom died, his mom was 15 when she had him. She was not a devoted mother. She liked to drink and dance and had no time for him. By the time Charles was 4, she had already been in jail for 5 years for robbery. Or she was going away for 5 years for robbery. And he started living on the streets.
Wait, when he was how old?
When, I guess by the time he was... Yeah.
Okay.
So or a teenager.
Yeah.
Manson has 3 or more grandchildren. They're not really sure because he doesn't know exactly how many children he had. Yeah. So little known facts about Manson are songs that he wrote made it onto a Beach Boys album.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He had a fleeting friendship with drummer Dennis Wilson. And the band recorded a version of Cease to Exist, which was a Manson song. They retitled it and reworked it. They said heavily reworked it, but...
Now, this was before Manson was known as crazy murderous.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they reworked it. It made it into a B-side on the single on Birds Over the Mountain.
Interesting.
He didn't get any writing credit.
Wow. I wonder, did he know? Like, is this something that came out eventually and the Beach Boys admitted it? Like, I wonder if he even knew at the time if it was reworked to a certain level. Or he must have been contacted as a co-writer to send that music into the Beach Boys.
I think he was on the hit list later for Manson.
Got it.
Like, because he was pissed about it.
Wow.
So, obviously they murdered Sharon Tate. But one of the things that I didn't know was they murdered Sharon Tate and her friends by mistake.
Didn't know that. I thought it was all random, though. I thought they were like random houses.
No. So Charles Manson was rejected by record producer Terry Melcher, and the son of Doris Day. And he lived in the house that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski lived in later. So it was his former house. They went in and
thinking that he still lived there,
exactly.
Killed everyone in there.
Exactly.
And it was never him. It was these young kids.
It was the young kids. So they thought they were like killing who he wanted, but really it was just Sharon Tate by it.
Oh my God.
They spilled her name on blood, or they spelled pig in blood on the door, and he also he put a gruesome tribute and misspelled Helter Skelter on the wall because he was obsessed with the Beatles.
Right.
So he almost got granted a mistrial because of Nixon. Nixon said that Manson was guilty directly or indirectly. So that the lawyers for him and Manson held up pictures saying like, this is not just, like the president of the country has stepped into the trial. Sound familiar?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds almost identical.
Exactly.
Jesus. Wait, but that didn't cause a mistrial.
It did not.
Okay.
He was sentenced
But that was actually one of the lines the lawyers were using.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
He was sentenced to death by the gas chamber, but he was granted, his sentence was commuted to life without parole because California abolished capital punishment.
Right.
One of the followers of the Manson family tried to kill Gerald Ford, but her gun jammed. And then
How many followers do they have? I'm not the exact number, but was it like a few or was it dozens?
I think it was like a dozen.
Okay.
It was
more than like 2 or 3.
Oh, yeah,
yeah. 5 on the Tate night, right?
And it was mostly women.
Right.
And so she served 34 years in prison. Guns N' Roses covered one of his songs called "Look at Your Game Girl," and he was due $500,000 in royalties, which was going to be paid to him. And one of the victim's sons interjected, sued, and got the money.
Good for them.
Yes.
That would be horrendous if you got paid for that. And it's kind of really stupid of the freaking Guns N' Roses to cover that.
Exactly. One of the things that came out of this was that Sharon Tate's sister petitioned for victims' rights, and now before anyone's now because of her, the victims' families are allowed to stay a statement in court before the verdict is handed down. So
wait, what are you talking about? Oh, this happened back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before that, you weren't allowed to speak out in court.
Oh,
now
for anything. Oh, interesting.
So now the victim's family is allowed to speak to the judge and say this is why he should get the maximum sentence.
That's incredible. For any case at all, or for any murder case?
Any murder case.
That's incredible, and that's nationwide. That's like a
federal?
Yeah.
It's in all U.S. territories. So, yeah. That's
Charlie Manson.
Charlie Manson.
It's so weird, the whole musical side, because you hear about, it's almost, I don't know, it's almost like you hear randomly people claiming to be fans, because it's like one of the kind of hip things that you could say, because not a lot of people know that he did music, and that was a huge thing. And it's
Marilyn Manson?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true. But it's also weird to think that it was like a driving force behind so much of this, it seems. If he was looking for that record producer's house, and if he was, like pursuing that as his outlet into everything, it seems like then the bitterness. But this kid all along was like out of his mind, and crazy as a kid all the way through.
Oh, absolutely.
But then the outlet being music, and that not working out, or maybe not working out in the way he sees it. And who knows? I always wonder, like, was that all premeditated throughout, and was he like, I'm gonna now get these people to do this, to like, or was there some combination of him just being totally crazy all along?
Well, his sister
somehow were like captivated by him, which I also don't really understand.
He was apparently very charismatic, and even as a child, his sister said that he would get girls to go beat up bullies that had picked on him.
Beat up bullies?
Yeah. So he
did it his whole life.
Yeah, he did it his whole life. He found girls that were downtrodden, and he would just lead them to attack people.
Wow.
So he did this his entire life.
That is crazy.
And one other thing too is, have you listened to his music?
I think I've heard it I couldn't. It's one of those things, like, I've seen all those movies on TBS that play as reruns. I feel like I've heard his music, but I couldn't like pinpoint it. I have an idea of what it sounds like.
I hate to say it, but it's
not bad.
It's not bad.
Well, that's the whole thing, yeah.
So it's understandable why, the Beach Boys would like hear it and be like, okay, we could do something.
Yeah, it's decent and kind of interesting.
Right. And then the last little thing that we were going to go to was just the disappointment that I feel right now. This is not even dark news, but it's just a disappointment that I feel right now, and all the stuff that I've heard of people coming out. Like Charlie Rose was just...
Wait, what?
8 people just came out and said Charlie Rose had sexual misconduct.
Oh my God.
Charlie Rose.
I had no idea. You're giving this news to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I said earlier about Franken. I think. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is absolutely horrible, and they're absolutely horrible for doing this, and it's. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to even begin on the topic, because it's a great example of how this should be taken much more seriously than it is. And I think it's one of the many topics of human existence in 2017 that is mentioned, and people act like they care about and act like they're informed, but really, when the truth is out there, we're devastatingly uninformed, and even people who know so many people who have been through these instances. You start to scratch your head that almost every woman we all know has been through this. And there's like such a high level problem here that it's I don't even know where you begin, because I don't know where do you start building out ways to. Well, it is a first step to talk about it, but then like we should be the next step. There should be a next step soon that's actionable.
I think that it's really I think it started with a trickle with the Silicon Valley. And a lot of the venture capitalists getting outed as being pervy, and all that. Exactly. Yeah. And then Harvey Weinstein started like the massive Me Too campaign, and since then, I don't know this guy, celebrity chef John Besh was accused by 25 women. Louis C.K. of course was accused by 5 women.
Kevin Spacey.
I didn't know about Kevin Spacey. Oh yeah, of course Kevin Spacey. And then. Actor Richard Dreyfuss.
Didn't know that.
Director Gary Goddard.
Yeah.
Andy Henry. Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is this all coming out like the last couple of days, or is this?
This was today's New York Times.
Was Dustin Hoffman?
No.
Charlie Rose, or is it like a list of all these people?
No, this is just a list of accusers, people who have been accused.
Got it.
Robert Knepper. I don't know him.
Sure.
And Jeremy Piven, Brett Ratner, Chris Savino, Steven Seagal, Tom Sizemore, Jeffrey Tambor, George Takei, James Toback, the creator of Mad Men, Matthew Weiner, actor Ed Westwick.
Well, and so think about this. We're like a month in.
Yeah.
This is probably less than a percentage.
Oh,
that's what's crazy. And then it's just about like, And it's a good thing. I mean, it's good that now you start seeing that people are speaking up. Hopefully more do, but certainly everyone won't be able to, because it's like an incredibly emotional, difficult, horrible thing. So I don't know. It's like freaky to think.
Yeah, but you know that. So the list goes on and on. But like the one thing that is really disturbing about this is Donald Trump has made this again yet another divisive issue where has no problem flailing like Al Franken,
right?
But won't even talk about Roy Moore,
right?
Or
himself,
yeah. And how has he just skirted under the radar with all this shit? Like, how has he like?
We can't.
They're like, isn't it like 17 people that accused him or something like that?
Yep. Well, the thing is, he hasn't skated under the radar. That's been in the forefront, but people just don't care.
Yeah.
Or it's not, obviously it's not bipartisan. It's like half the people care and keep talking about it, but the other half doesn't listen, or the other half doesn't care, or some combination of that. And it's so much farther beyond even politics. It's like this horrible thing that's happening on like almost a universal level to half of the country, half of the world.
Right.
And it's just devastating.
Yeah. So that's the end of our lovely
news that it gets.
Well, I mean, I could go into
No. We'll talk to you. We'll see you next week. I can't take it anymore.
Okay, so thanks for listening. We welcome your comments, ideas at contact@Vomiting Rainbows. Find us on We Vomit Rainbows on all social media. Listen on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. Rate us, help us grow. And thanks for listening.